that would have been anybody else but Jeff, I would have done that. Jeff, I feel familiar enough with, he was the one that did Mary Alice when we preached at South Point. And one of the conditions of his being our youth minister was that he would date Mary Alice. It was good. Today it happens to be 2 different holidays. I'm not sure that many of you would be recognize either one, but the holiday coming up during the week on the 14th happens to be Flag Day. And I thought for a long time about preaching a sermon this morning concerning our flag, possibly the Christian flag, bring it out, and so forth. And I think, well, we're going through the videos at 10 o'clock from wall builders concerning our nation. So I decided not to do anything as far as the Flag Day was concerned. But today is also Pentecost Sunday. Pentecost happens to be a very prominent holiday in the New Testament, one that we need to realize. I think about the second chapter of the book of Acts, where when the day of Pentecost was fully come, they were all with one accord in one place, which is probably Solomon's porch in the temple. And it would be big enough to hold all the people that were there. But as I think about this particular time, that the Spirit of God came and rested upon the disciples. The sound of a mighty rushing wind, tongues of fire set on their heads, and they all began speaking in tongues. There's a big debate as to whether this was the true tongues or it was some other kind of tongues, but the Bible is very clear on the day of Pentecost. Each one heard what the other was saying in their own language. So it was clear that they were doing that. But the book of Acts is a very interesting book. It begins with the ascension of Christ 10 days before Pentecost. And it continues until Paul was in prison in Rome during his first Roman imprisonment. It tells the history of the church. The official name is Acts of the Apostles. Although all the apostles are not mentioned as far as the book of Acts is concerned, except in the listing in the very beginning. It's mainly the work of Peter and Paul, beginning with Peter, then some of James, and then Paul. But it is also the early history of the church, showing how the church grew, the plan of salvation. And by the way, the only place that you should get the plan of salvation is from the book of Acts. Others have twisted the book of Romans, talk about the Roman road. There's some that say the book of Acts is not important as far as the plan of salvation is concerned. But I think it is. But as you look at Pentecost and what happened there is a very significant change that took place among the disciples. If you read in the Gospels, at the very end of the Gospels, after Christ died on the cross and was buried, the Bible says that they were in the upper room with the doors being locked for fear of the Jews, what the Jews could do. They stayed there until they were actually encouraged by Jesus before he ascended in one of the first chapter of the book of Acts. And they were given the commission to go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. If you remember, that was one of the themes that we closed last week's sermon with, was the idea of the Great Commission. It's our responsibility to be able to persuade, and the purpose of the church is to win souls and bring souls unto Christ. Of course, there's other reasons why we do exist. But as I look in the book of Acts, stemming from the day of Pentecost, I find the entire attitude the entire attitude of the church people, of the apostles, changing from fear to boldness. They became bold, and because of their boldness, they were able to win souls. I have 4 points I want to bring out. And those 4 particular points that I want to bring out are important for us today as far as the Howland Church of Christ is concerned. Number 1, they had a firm belief in the resurrection of Jesus Christ. I am appalled at the number of churches today. Now I'm speaking of the church in general, not Church of Christ only. But the number of churches today that try to dismiss the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Jeff and I were talking a few minutes ago about my preaching at the West Corbin Church. There was a former minister of that particular congregation who believed that the appearances of Jesus Christ were a spiritual resurrection. That it was not a bodily resurrection. And I find that to be very difficult to accept. And the point was that he appeared in a locked room with the doors being locked. Why, he had an influence over the Mother Nature things. He walked on water. He fed 5,000 people and having 12 baskets full of food left over from 5 loaves and 2 fishes. So why couldn't he appear in a locked room as a body? I think that the episode with Thomas would be almost negated if you take away a bodily resurrection. He ate with the disciples after his resurrection, a bodily resurrection. So as far as I'm concerned, when you begin to think about the idea of the resurrection being a spiritual or an hallucination or a ghostly type of situation, that does not cut it as far as Scripture is concerned. The early Christians believed without a doubt in their mind that Jesus Christ rose from the dead. They walked with him. They talked with him. They were able to hear what he had to say. And there was a lot of things that they need expressed as far as that particular time is concerned. The second thing that comes to my mind is the fact that not only did they believe that they had a commitment to God, they had a commitment to God. It is what God wanted. Remember when the disciples were brought before the Sanhedrin or the council? Don't preach in his name. Don't bring his death down upon us. Remember what they said? In Acts 4:19, that Peter and John answered and said to them, whether it is right in the sight of God to listen to you more than to God you judge. I think we need to learn that no matter what our government says, if it's contrary to Scripture, we believe what the Scriptures say and not what the government has to say. In Acts 5:29, but Peter and the other apostles answered and said, we ought to obey God rather than man. And I think we need to call sin, regardless of who it hurts. I think we ought to say that abortion is wrong. I think we ought to say that homosexuality is wrong. While we love the abortionist and pray for them that they might change their ways, while we love the homosexual and pray for them that they might come to the truth of the matter. I think it's time that we just stop tiptoeing around it and stand firm for what God has to say. For He made us, He knows us. Again, I think there's a passion for souls. Several years ago, I worked in a CPA firm in Huntington. In fact, Jeff, I think I was working at the CPA firm when you came to help me at South Point. And I remember that right above where we worked, when we get to the parking lot that we used, there was a row of saloons. And some of the ladies of the CPA firm would walk by there, they would be accosted. They would have comments made to them that were not very comely. So I made it a practice that if I happened to be working late one night, and some of them had to walk to their car, I would walk with them for their protection. And as we were walking by, a lot of these drunks, and I'm going to call them drunks because that's exactly what they were, started to yell at these women. And I just kept walking with them, hoping that my presence would be a protection for them. I think I was scared to death that something would happen. And I remember one time, I was walking with one of the ladies, a very good-looking young lady, younger than me. And as we were walking, she looked over at me and she said, "Phil, you're crying." I said, "Yes, I am." And when we got out of the area, she looked at me and said, "Why were you crying back there?" I said, "Because I know what their soul is going to be when they go into eternity." We need to have a passion for soul. If somebody's not a Christian, we need to realize that their soul will be lost, and they need to become a Christian. And the last point that I have in my sermon, they had a boldness to stand up and to preach the word because they prayed. And I have a scripture there that shows their prayer time. They prayed for boldness. The place was shaken in which they prayed. They prayed for the boldness. When I was in college, my wife and I got married my senior year. And as we got married, we got a small church up in Cabin Creek, West Virginia. The name of the town was Estelle. And I stayed with them the summer after I graduated in order to be able to help build the church. And I remember going out in the community and knocking on doors in order to be able to invite people to come to church. And it used to be when I was first started out, and Jeff, you might have had some similar experiences, I would walk up on a porch and walk to the door and knock on the door, and all the time I would say, "Open my home, open my home, open my home." Turned out in later years when I went out to call the community like that, my response was, "I hope at home, I hope at home, I hope at home." I prayed for boldness to be able to stand firm, not only in my passion for their soul, but to stand firm upon the Word of God. Then the second thought that comes to my mind. We were preaching down in Raceland, Kentucky. And as we were preaching there, Steve had a little bit of a friendship going with a young lady by the name of Kathy. And Kathy wasn't a Christian. She wanted to be baptized. Of course, we honored the parents' desire. And her mother, and her dad was not in the picture at the time. Her mother would not let her be baptized. Operation Evangelize, Dave Lucas and company came over to held a youth revival for us, and boy, we had a great time. And after church one Sunday night, Kathy came to Dave and I. She says, I still want to be baptized. Will you talk to Mom? So Dave and I went into the home that night. And we sat down with Kathy's mother. And we talked. We pled. We even used the scriptures. We ought to obey God rather than man. And she would not authorize or allow us to baptize. I was shocked. We were there for a couple of hours talking to her mother. And I was shocked when I went back to church. The church people were still there. We had almost 100 people at the time, and I would say that at least 75 are still there. And they were sitting in different locations. And as they would, time would come, they would have prayer. And they would just be praying for the situation. And we had to go back and report that, that Kathy's mother would not allow her to be baptized. So I remember Holy Lewis, who was one of the elders of the church, spoke up and says, fellow people, he says, we're going to continue to pray that this situation may be resolved. He had a word of prayer, we all went home. Steve, you might help me on this. I think the very, very next Sunday. Kathy's mother was there. And Kathy was sitting in the front of the church. She sang in the choir, and she had a beautiful voice. And one time, she went professional. And as we were singing the invitation hymn, Kathy looked around at her mother. And her mother shook her head, yes. And we baptized her in Christ. That church had a passion for souls. And I have said before that we had a period of time of 19 weeks where we had somebody come to either be baptized, transfer membership, or whatever. A response to every invitation, even on Wednesday night. 19 weeks. We need a passion for the souls. And may that passion exist. May that boldness prevail. And may we get busy and grow. Not for our glory. Not for what we want to do. But the name of Christ might be glorified. That Jesus may be the center of all that we do. We're going to be singing our song of invitation. Almost persuaded, one verse. If there's any here that needs to accept Christ, we invite you to come to a stand and sing.